네, 회빈 여러분께 안내 말씀드립니다. 잠시 후 2021 코리아 타임즈 글로벌 ESG 포럼이 시작될 예정입니다. 아직 행사장 밖에 계신 내외빈께서는 행사장인 국제회의장으로 입장해 주시기 바랍니다. Ladies and gentlemen, 2021 Korea Times Global ESG Forum will begin shortly. Please be seated at your table. 코로나 바이러스 예방을 위해서 입장하실 때에는 반드시 마스크를 착용해 주시고 좌석 또한 거리 유지를 유지해 주시기 바랍니다. 다시 한번 말씀드리겠습니다. 잠시 후 2021 코리아 타임즈 글로벌 ESG 포럼이 시작될 예정입니다. 아직 행사장 밖에 계신 내외인께서는 행사장인 국제회의장으로 입장해 주시기 바랍니다. Ladies and gentlemen, 2021 Korea Times Global ESG Forum will begin shortly. Please be seated at your table. 네, 코로나 바이러스 예방을 위해서 입장하실 때에는 마스크를 착용해 주시고 좌석 또한 거리 유지를 해 주시기 바랍니다. 그리고 곳곳에 손 세정제가 비치되어 있습니다. Please wear your face masks at all times in Grand Hall to prevent the spread of COVID-19 and maintain your distance from each other. Hand sanitizers are placed throughout the room for your use. (2021) 코리아 타임스 글로벌 ESG 포럼에 참석해 주신 내외빈 여러분께 안내 말씀드리겠습니다. 포럼 시작에 앞서서 기념사진 촬영을 진행하도록 하겠습니다. 내외빈 여러분, 기념사진 촬영을 진행하도록 하겠습니다. 호명되신 분들께서는 무대 앞쪽으로 오셔서 기념 촬영에 함께해 주시기 바랍니다. Attention please, I'd like to inform the guests attending the 2021 Korea Times Global ESG Forum. Before we start, a VIP photo session is scheduled. Please come to the front of the stage and join the group photo session. 자, 앞쪽에 화면을 보시기 바랍니다. 자, 무대 위로 올라와 주시기 바랍니다. 네, VIP 분들 앞쪽의 화면에서 자리 배치 먼저 확인하신 후에 바닥 이름표에 맞춰서 해당 위치에 서주시면 되겠습니다. VIP 분들의 사진 촬영이 있겠습니다. 무대 위로 올라와 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 제가 호명하도록 하겠습니다. 첫 번째 연단 마틴 헨겔만 대표님 서주시면 되겠습니다. 그 옆에 요나스 올덴홀드 대표님, 다음으로는 크리스토프 하이더 사무총장님 서주시면 되겠습니다. 다음 박성현 부사장님, 권기준 부사장님, 김상경 회장님, 이동섭 실장님 되겠습니다. 그 밑줄 호명하도록 하겠습니다. 오영진 대표님, 다비드 피에르 잘리콘 회장님, 권준학 행장님, 박성호 행장님, 허인 행장님, 진옥동 행장님, 유명순 행장님, 서유석 대표님입니다. 마지막 줄입니다. 이영석 사장님, 제임스 김 회장님, 전승호 사장님, 정은보 원장님, 승명호 회장님, 손태승 회장님, 이형희 위원장님, 이용진 시니어 파트너님, 최만현 대표님입니다. 빈자리가 있으시면 붙여서 자리를 마련해 주셔도 좋겠습니다. 네, 옆자리 확인하시고요. 빈자리가 있으시면 붙여서 대형을 만들어 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 네, 맨 뒷자리에 계시는 분들은 자리를 한번 모아주셔도 좋을 것 같습니다. 네, 자리를 한번 붙여서 대형을 만들어 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 네, clap your hands, please. 네, 감사합니다. 기념 촬영 마쳤습니다. 자리로 돌아가 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 테이블에 이름이 올려져 있습니다. 이름을 보시고 찾아서 앉아 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 안내 말씀드립니다. 이제 곧 2021 코리아 타임스 글로벌 ESG 포럼이 시작될 예정입니다. 행사의 원활한 진행을 위해 가지고 계신 휴대전화는 진동 모드로 바꿔주시면 감사하겠습니다. VIP분들의 착석이 완료되는 대로 행사를 시작하도록 하겠습니다. Ladies and gentlemen, 2021 Korea Times Global ESG Forum will begin shortly. Please switch your mobile phones into silent mode. We'll begin the ceremony as soon as the VIPs are seated. 오늘 행사를 위해서 한국어와 영어 동시 통역을 위한 리시버가 테이블 위에 준비되어 있습니다. 리시버 채널 1번은 한국어, 2번은 영어로 준비되어 있습니다. 필요하신 분께서는 이용해 주시기 바랍니다. We have simultaneous interpretation ready for today's forum. Please use the receivers on your table and turn to channel 1 for Korean and channel 2 for English. 네, 안녕하십니까. 2021 코리아 타임스 글로벌 ESG 포럼의 사회를 맡은 아나운서 이인영입니다.
Forum, and I am Lee In-young, the MC of today's forum.
네, 오늘 이렇게 뜻깊은 자리에 사회를 맡게 되어서 정말 영광스럽게 생각합니다. 2021 코리아 타임즈 글로벌 ESG 포럼은 Global Investors ESG Proposals라는 주제로 진행됩니다. 코로나19 이후 ESG는 기업뿐만 아니라 우리 사회를 지속 가능하게 만드는 중요한 원천이자 촉매제로 등장했습니다. 지속 가능한 성장을 위한 성공적 전략 수립을 위해서는 글로벌 투자자들의 ESG 투자 원칙을 이해하는
To continue with the sustainable development, ESG principles must be understood. And the Korea Times is now hosting this forum in order to share the issues and trends after the COVID-19 and discuss strategies for the ESG.
행사 시작에 앞서서
Before starting today's event, I'd like to introduce the VIPs who are attending in this forum. I will call their name one by one.
한국일보, 코리아 타임스
First of all, we have
승명호 회장님.
Chairman 승명호 of Korea Times.
다음으로는 금융감독원
Next, we have Governor 정은보 of the FSS.
다음으로 한국투자공사
We have
진승호 사장님
CEO
함께하십니다.
진승호 of KIC.
다음으로는 우리금융그룹
From
손태승
Uri
회장님
Finance,
함께하십니다.
we have Chairman 손등세.
다음으로
Next,
주한미국 상공회의소 제임스 킴
Amcham, we
회장님
have
함께하고 계십니다.
President James Kim.
마지막으로 한불
Last but not
상공회의소
least, from
다비드
KCCI,
피에르 회장님 함께하고 계십니다. 다비드
Mr. David Perils. From France, Chamber of Commerce in Korea. And then we still have some VIPs who are coming to this forum, so we will take a photo once again after they arrive in this forum. So there are some VIPs who arrived a little bit late, so we'd like to take a photo once again. So the VIPs who actually participated in the VIP photography, so please come up to the stage once again for another photo shoot.
자리는 아까 전에 서 계셨던 자리에 서시면
So please
되겠습니다.
stand in the line that we informed you previously.
네, 자리를 붙이셔서 대용을 좀 만들어 주시면 감사하겠는데요.
So please
네,
stand
감사합니다.
closer to each other.
네, 사진 촬영 대용이 준비되었습니다.
So we are ready for another photo shoot.
네. 네, clap your hands, please. 네, 사진 촬영 종료되었습니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you very
자리로
much, and you may
돌아가
return to your seat.
감사하겠습니다. 네, 시간 관계상 참석하신 모든
Because of
분들을
the
소개해드리지
time
못하는 점
constraint,
양해
please
부탁드리며
understand that we
바쁘신
cannot
와중에
introduce
귀한
all
걸음을
of
주신
you
모든
one by one,
분들께
but
다시
thank
한번
you
감사
once again for
말씀드립니다.
participating in this forum
자,
despite
이제
your
먼저
busy schedule.
승명호 한국일보
First of all, we will
코리아타임스
listen to
사장님의
the
환영사가
welcoming
있겠습니다.
remarks by
여러분,
Chairman
뜨거운
Seung
박수로
Myung-ho of
환영해
Korea
주시기
Times.
바랍니다.
Please welcome Chairman with a big round of applause.
안녕하십니까.
Good morning,
한국일보 코리아 타임즈
ladies and
회장
gentlemen. I am
승명호입니다.
Chairman Seung Myung-ho of Korea Times.
바쁘신 와중에도 귀중한 시간을
I'd
내주신
like to thank our
정은보
VIPs who have honored us with their presence despite their busy schedule. Governor Jung Eun-bo of the FSS, CEO Jin Seung-ho of the KIC, as well as all of the participants.
또한 오늘 저희 포럼에서
Also, I would like to thank the panelists who will share a high level of discussion about the topic ESG today.
지난해부터 시작한 코로나
Because of the
19로
COVID-19 that started last year, all of us, including small business owners and self-employed people, are still suffering.
다음 달부터
From next month, we will return to the normal life step by step, but COVID-related risks are still unexpectable.
상황입니다. 그러나 코로나는
However,
우리 사회에 많은 변화를
COVID-19 has
가져오고
brought
있고
many changes to our
근본적인
society
변화를
and
요구하고
is now
있습니다.
asking for fundamental changes.
디지털 전환이 가속화되고
Digital
있으며
transformation is now being
일하는 방식도
accelerated,
크게
and then the
변화하고
way of
있습니다.
work is changing really fast.
이러한 대전환의
At a time of
시대에서
great
변화를
transformation,
거부하고
if we
현실에
refuse to
안주하려
change
한다면
and settle for the
도태되는
reality,
것은
falling
시간
behind
문제일
all
것입니다.
will be a matter of time.
기업들도 코로나 위기를
In order
기회로
to make
만들기 위해
COVID an
실패를
opportunity for
두려워하지
businesses,
않는
they
실험을
must continuously
계속해야 할
experiment
것이며
without fear
단기적인
and
목표를
establish
넘어
future-oriented
미래지향적인
business
경영
strategies
전략을 세워야
that go
할
beyond
때입니다.
the short-term perspective.
다행스럽게도
Fortunately,
코로나 위기 상황에서도
despite the
한국의
COVID-19 risk,
글로벌
the
위상은
Korea's
점점
status in the
높아지고
world
있습니다.
has been
최근
enhancing.
선풍적인 인기를 모으고
As you
있는
can see
오징어
from
게임과
Squid Game and
BTS가
BTS that are
보여주듯이
very sensational around the
한류와
world,
한국의 문화는
Hallyu and Korea's
전
culture
세계에서
are
새로운
now
현상으로
loved by the world,
자리매김하고
and it is
있습니다.
now a new phenomenon.
또한 한류뿐 아니라
Also, not only the
국내
Hallyu,
기업들의
but also the
글로벌
economic
경쟁력도
status and
갈수록
corporate
커지고 있습니다.
competitiveness of the Korean
아울러
companies
국내 기업의
are
힘과
going up with
영향력이
their global
커지면서
competitiveness.
그에 따르는
Also, their power and
책임감도
influence
또한
get
커지고
bigger and
있습니다.
bigger, so as their
무엇보다
responsibilities.
우리가 발상의
Most of
전환을
all, we must make a
해야 할
shift in
부분은
our
환경에
viewpoint
대한
for the sake
인식입니다.
of environment.
책임 경영을 통해서 사회적
Through
문제를
responsible
해결하고
management, we
환경에
must solve
더욱
social
적극적인
issues
관심을
and pay
가져야
more
할 때입니다.
attention to the environmental issues.
환경과 사회적 책임,
ESG stands for
건강하고 투명한
environment,
경영을
social and
요구하는
governance,
ESG가
and that asks
기업의
us
생존의
to
문제를 넘어
promote social
지속
responsibility
발전의
and
가장
sound
중요한
and
요소가
transparent businesses
돼가고 있습니다.
that are the most important elements for
ESG
sustainable
경영을 통해서
development.
환경, 사회적 책임을
It has been
다할수록
proven that if we
장기적으로는
promote
기업
ESG,
성과에
that will
긍정적
bring
영향을 줄 수
positive
있다는
impact to the
결과가
business
입증되고
performances
있습니다.
in the long term.
이제
In
지속
order to
성장
secure
동력을
a
확보하기
driver
위해서
for sustainable growth
ESG
of the
경영을
future,
보다
ESG
적극적으로
must be the
기업
center
전략으로
of
삼아야
corporate
합니다.
strategies.
오늘 코리아 타임즈가
I
주최하는
sincerely
포럼을
hope that
통해
in this
국내
forum that
기업들이
is hosted by Korea
ESG
Times,
경영에
Korean
보다
companies will pay
현실적이고
more attention
효과적인
to the ESG
전략을 세울 수
management
있는
and
계기가
establish
되었으면 합니다.
more realistic and
코리아
effective
타임즈는
strategies.
앞으로도
Korea Times
ESG
will
이슈를
deal with
계속
ESG
다룰
issues
예정입니다.
continuously in
그
the future.
일환으로
And one of the
내년도에
efforts
세계적인
will
데이터
be
통계 회사인
our collaboration with a global
스태티스타와
data
공동으로
statistic company
ESG
called
분야에
Statista.
앞서가는 기업들을
And with them,
선정해서
we will
기업들에게
conduct a survey
새로운
on ESG leading
ESG
companies
지속 가능한
so that we
성장을
can
위한
provide
새로운
opportunities to
동력을
build up new
제공하고자 합니다.
drivers for ESG and sustainable
끝으로
growth.
오늘 귀한 시간 내주신 내빈
Last but not
여러분들과
least, our distinguished
온라인
guests,
중계를 통해
as well as online
포럼을 보고 계신
participants,
시청자
I'd
여러분
like to
모두
thank you
다시 한번
once again for
감사의
your
말씀을
kind
드립니다.
interest and
또한
support. And also,
코로나
I
방역
hope you
지침에
could
따라서
understand
이
that we could
자리에
not
많은
invite
분들을
more people
초청하지
because
못한
of the
점 양해
COVID-19
부탁드립니다.
disinfection guideline.
코리아 타임즈는 앞으로도
Korea
국내외
Times
독자들이
is
원하는
committed
뉴스를
to
사실에
continuing
입각하여
with our digital
국제적인
innovation
시각과
in order to
미래
report
지향적인
based on the
관점에서
facts
보도하기
and
위한
from a global,
디지털
future-oriented
혁신을
perspective
지속할
for
것입니다.
our readers.
많은 관심과
We look forward
성원
to having your
부탁드립니다.
support.
감사합니다.
Thank you.
네, 환영사를 해주신
Thank you very
승명호
much,
원장님께
President
다시
Sung
한번 큰 박수
Myung-ho. Please give
부탁드리겠습니다.
him another round of applause.
이제 그럼 본격적인 포럼을 시작해 보도록 하겠습니다.
Now we're going to
정은보
start the
금융감독원
forum.
원장님께서
First of all, we would like to invite Mr. Jung Eun-bo, the governor of the FSS, to make the opening address.
정은보 원장님을 큰 박수로
Please
맞이해 주시기
welcome him
바랍니다.
with a big round of applause.
안녕하십니까?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
금융감독원 원장 정은보.
I am Jung Eun-bo, the governor of Financial Supervisor Service of Korea. I sincerely congratulate the opening of 2021 Korea Times ESG Forum.
이렇게 뜻깊은 자리를
I would like to thank
코리아 타임스
Mr. Sung Myung-ho, the president of Korea Times, and Mr. Oh Young-jin, the CEO of Korea Times, for organizing this meaningful
주저
forum.
연설과 토론을 맡아주실
My sincere gratitude also goes to the keynote speakers and
예외 귀빈
expert
여러분.
panelists and all the participants of the forum. Nice to meet you all.
최근에 대내외 금융 환경은
In the
주요국의
financial environment, home and abroad, we have seen changes in the stance of monetary policies among key countries, and the default risk of Chinese real estate sector has increased uncertainty in the market. Under the low interest rate and quantitative easing policies, asset bubbles have been created and private debt has rapidly increased, posing risks in the market. Recently, with the penetration of vaccines and expectation for a gradual return to a normal daily life, demand in the global economy is recovering, but the supply bottleneck is highly likely to extend inflation. This year, the Korean economy was on a robust recovery trend, but its pace of growth has significantly decreased since the third quarter this year, raising concerns over possible economic slowdown. Distinguished guests, in the uncertain economic situation at home and abroad, it will be burdensome for companies to practice ESG management. However, today in this ESG forum, we are discussing the ESG and emphasizing the importance of ESG because ESG is a difficult but imperative task that should be conducted urgently right now. Under this critical situation, the Korean government has recently adjusted its greenhouse gas emission target upward. That is to reduce the emission 40% by 2030 compared to the level of 2018. From a different angle, ESG can be a new opportunity for corporate management. First of all, in terms of corporate value, ESG performance has positive influence on the stock price volatility and long-term return according to many research outcomes. In terms of financing, corporate ESG performance works as a positive factor in attracting foreign investors. In terms of securing potential customers, the MZ generation makes consumption based on their own value and belief, which explains why they purchase products considering their ESG performance. However, recently, companies have taken makeshift measures such as greenwashing. Such measures have negative impact on the market and might fail to win the heart of the customers. Companies need to manage their business in a way to enhance the fundamental value of ESG to meet the expectations from consumers and respond to the needs of the times. FSS will continue performing a fair assessment of the ESG roles of businesses while encouraging transparent and effective ESG disclosure. Distinguished guests, in the past, Mahatma Gandhi said, quote, "Earth provides enough to satisfy every man's needs, but not every man's greed," unquote. So far, companies have pursued their short-term profit. The greed of companies that only pursued short-term profit has caused diverse social expenses. If we don't make a change right now, the earth might not be able to satisfy even the very basic needs of humans. I hope that today's forum will serve as a platform to share our wisdom about sustainable earth environment and sustainable corporate management. With this, I would like to close my remarks. Thank you very much for your attention.
네, 훌륭한 연설을 해주신
Thank you very much.
원장님께 다시 한번 뜨거운 박수
Mr.
부탁드립니다.
Chong the governor of FSS, please give him a warm round of applause again.
다음으로는 진승호 한국투자공사 이사회 의장
And
겸
next,
사장님께서
CEO
key
Mr.
issues
Kim
for
Jin-sungho
ESG
of
investment,
KIC will talk about the key issues for ESG investment, improving environments, corporate governance, and social responsibility in his keynote speech. Please welcome him with a big round of applause. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Jin Seung-ho, CEO of Korea Investment Corporation. I'm very delighted to participate in this 2021 Korea Times Global ESG Forum. First of all, I'd like to thank Chairman Seung-myung-ho of Korea Times as well as his staff members for organizing this meaningful event. As you may well know, the KIC is one of the leading institutional investors in Korea that has established the global stewardship principles. And we have strived to increase the rate of return and promote sustainability through ESG-based investment. One of the example is the introduction of ESG integration to apply to all of the asset classes and processes. Since I became the CEO of the KIC, we established the responsible investment team to make sure that ESG is our future direction. And we are now playing a very important role to lead the global responsible investment. KIC is committed to continuously developing ESG investment and promoting ESG strategic fund and green project investment. We will build a model to respond against the climate change and apply to our portfolio. And just like helpers of the US and NBIM of Norway, we will try to settle as a global exemplary institutional investment with our climate change response model. Second, we will strengthen transparency and network in order to set up a good example of spreading global ESG. KIC has announced that we are supporting the TCFD and we have joined the OPSWF and we are doing many activities for the ESG.
In order to enhance transparency, we will cooperate with global investors through a substantial partnership to improve KIC's ESG performance. Distinguished guests, I have recently worked on the improvement of KIC's business management and overall investment activities, focusing on ESG, and I felt that putting ESG into practice would not be as easy as I thought. The glacier is melting down, and unprecedented forest fire and flooding have taken place. And we hear news about such abnormal climate issues. But we still feel that such climate issues are far from our daily life. And many investors doubt that ESG helps increase the return on their investment. For example, they think that it is inconvenient to review and execute ESG in their investment process, or that ESG might become an obstacle to improving their practical investment performance. In order to ensure that ESG contributes to improving the environmental, corporate, and social issues, we should recognize and make sure that practicing ESG does not cause losses. Recently, ESG has become the mainstream idea. Everyone is talking about ESG, but it is time for us to move beyond just discussing ESG. We should join our hands together as socially responsible institutional investors to put ESG into practice. KIC has already been sharing overseas investment information and know-how with Korean public investors to strengthen our partnership with them. For example, we have hosted Overseas Investment Council meeting with public institutions since 2013, and from 2019, we have held a special seminar titled ESG Day. We will also hold the ESG Day seminar by the end of this year. We will work with global experts in the area of responsible investment to identify the global responsible investment trend and establish key action agenda and contribute to the spread of responsible investment practices in the Korean capital market and financial industry. I would like to ask you to come forward to practice ESG for the public good in the interest of everyone. We will be with you as a trustworthy partner in this journey. Thank you.
큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
Please give him a big round of applause.
귀중한 말씀 전해주신
Thank you very much for your keynote
사장님,
address.
감사합니다.
Mr. Jin Seung-ho, the CEO of KIC. Thank you very much.
네, 이제 다음 패널 토론 시간에 앞서서 잠시 휴식
Before
시간을
moving on
갖고자
to panel
합니다.
discussion,
코로나19
we will
방역을
take a
위해서
short break.
앞사람과 거리를 두고 이동해 주시기
We are
바라며
abiding by
다른
the
사람과
COVID-19
가급적이면
prevention
밀접한
rules.
접촉이나
Please
대화를
refrain
삼가하고
from
거리
having
두기를
contact
실천해서
with the
코로나19
other
예방에
people in the
힘써주시기
conference
바랍니다.
hall, and
잠시
please
후 9시
respect the
40분에
COVID-19
계속 이어나가도록
prevention
하겠습니다.
rules. We're going to start the panel discussion from 9:40.
안내 말씀드리겠습니다. 잠시 후 9시 40분부터 첫 번째 세션이 진행될 예정입니다. 아직 입장하지 않으신 내빈들께서는 마스크 착용 및 손세정제 이용 후에 서둘러서
From
입장하셔서
9:40, we're
착석해
going to
주시기
start the
바랍니다.
first panel discussion. All the
다시 한번 안내
participants are kindly
말씀드리겠습니다. 잠시
requested
후
to
9시
come to the
40분부터 첫
conference
번째
hall
세션이
and be
진행될
seated.
예정입니다.
We're going
아직
to
입장하지
start the
않으신
first panel
내빈들께서는
discussion
마스크
session
착용
from
및 손세정제 이용
9:40.
후에
Please
서둘러서
wear a
입장해
mask
주시기
and
바랍니다.
use the hand sanitizer, and please take your seat.
안내 말씀드리겠습니다. 잠시 후 9시 40분부터 첫 번째 세션이 진행될 예정입니다. 입장하지 않으신 내빈들께서는
From
마스크 착용 및 손세정제
9:40, we
이용
will
후에
begin the first
서둘러서
panel discussion
입장하셔서
session.
착석해 주시기
Please
바랍니다.
wear a mask and
Ladies
use
and
hand
gentlemen,
sanitizer.
the first session will begin at 9:40. The first session will begin at 9:40. Please enter the grand hall and be seated. 네, 이제 계속해서 세션을 이어가도록
We're
하겠습니다.
going to start
세션
the
1,
first panel
세션 2는
discussion.
패널 토론으로 준비되어
We
있습니다.
have prepared two
먼저 첫 번째
panel
세션의
discussion
주제는
sessions.
Global
In the
Investors
first panel
ESG
discussion
Investment
session, the topic
Principles입니다.
is Global Investors ESG
모더레이터로는
Investment
이용진
Principles.
맥킨지 한국
Mr.
사무소 시니어
이용진, the
파트너님,
senior partner of McKinsey
토론자로는
Korea,
이동섭
will be the
국민연금
moderator.
수탁자
And
책임실장님,
Mr.
최만현
이동섭 from
블랙록
MBS,
자산운용
Mr.
한국
최만현, the
요나스 올덴
CEO
홀드
of
스위스
Blackrock
리아시아
Asset Management
PT
Korea,
한국 지점
and
대표님이
Jonas
함께해 주시겠습니다.
Jonas
그리고 해외에서 화상 회의로 토론에
the
참여해주고
CEO
계시는
of Swiss
스티븐
Re Korea,
밀리어트 BNP
and Mr.
파리바
Stephen
자산운용
Elliott,
글로벌 소비자 그룹
the
대표님이십니다.
CEO of
큰
Global
박수
Consumers Group of
부탁드립니다.
BNP Paribas Asset Management, will participate as panelists in this session. Please welcome them.
Good morning. Stephen, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you, thank you.
All right, great. Well, welcome, and I'm really pleased to be sitting with this distinguished group. I was just reflecting before we get started that this group represents over $10 trillion of money that is being managed around the world. Blackrock alone has over $9.5 billion. National Pension Fund is close to $9.5 trillion, I'm sorry, and National Pension Fund also is close to $1 trillion. So there's a lot of money here, and as they say, follow the money. The money flow really helps understand how the world will move. So I'm really pleased and honored to be in this panel with this distinguished group here. We'll have each of the panel members talk about their company's vision for ESG, and I've asked each of them to talk about a different part of E, S, and G. As you know, E, S, and G are very, very different topics. They're related in the sense that they're helping create a better world and a better corporations in general, but the issues and the challenges are quite distinct. So we will start first with Mr. Choi from Blackrock, talking about how Blackrock is viewing the overall challenges, especially with one of the most, I would say, sensitive topics in Korea, governance, how Blackrock is thinking about this topic. So Mr. Choi, I invite you to start first.
Okay, good morning. I'm very delighted to speak today on sustainable investment at Blackrock. Blackrock's purpose is to help more and more people experience financial well-being. As a fiduciary, we are deeply committed to helping our client build a resilient and well-constructed portfolio that are critical to achieving their long-term goals. Blackrock Sustainable Investing spans a range of strategies combine traditional investment approaches with ESG insight to seek to both financial and purpose-driven outcomes. We believe sustainable investing is not temporary theme, but is going mainstream. So we also believe integrating material sustainability-related insight into our investment processes will improve long-term risk-adjusted return. So we're seeing meaningful progress in executing on these opportunities in sustainability. Momentum remains strong. We're seeing significant net flows across all the region into sustainable product, especially since COVID-19. So as of the end of September 2021, Blackrock managed around $434 billion in our dedicated sustainable investment platform, including ESG broad, thematic, and impact fund. So we manage an additional $674 billion of assets across Blackrock's broader platform that utilize ESG screens. And even year to date, we had around $80 billion of sustainable inflows. In Q3, most recently, we had a $32 billion inflow. As I said before, it is Blackrock's investment conviction that climate risk is investment risk. Climate change has become a defining factor in companies' long-term prospect. We seek to provide the client a clear picture of how sustainability-related issues affect risk and long-term financial performance. ESG integration is core part of BlackRock's investment process. It is responsibility of our investment teams. ESG integration means, first, each strategy has a description of how ESG fits into investment process. Second, portfolio managers are accountable for managing exposure to material ESG risk. Third, investment teams are able to provide evidence of how ESG considerations inform investment decisions in each portfolio. BlackRock's RQA team reviews ESG risk alongside with traditional investment risk investment team in their portfolio review regularly. As of today, all of active portfolios and advisory strategies at BlackRock are fully ESG integrated. In terms of our stewardship, it's also a very important activity for sustainable investment. We're having conversation with corporates seeking to support them in moving forward their sustainable strategies, especially on the decarbonization strategies. We aim to vote against the companies at shareholders meeting when they're not sufficiently disclosing or not mitigating the impact on the environment. Our public market strategy, we continue to expanding access to high quality ESG data source. It's quite important, through Aladdin, which is actually our core risk management investment technology platform. In addition to third-party data, we have developed proprietary measurement tools to deepen our investors' understanding of material ESG risk. Even for our private market strategies, we continue to develop and evolve proprietary tools underpin investment teams' ESG due diligence, so that they remain robust, and these tools are tailored by asset class and by the industry. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jonas, this year has seen unprecedented levels of disasters around the world. I have friends in the West Coast who were complaining about the record heat in Seattle. I mean, it's one of my favorite cities in the world, and at record heat. We had massive power outages in Texas. Last couple of weeks was extremely cold here. One of the coldest falls we've had in Korea. All of this, I'm sure, is having profound implications as you think about the environment. And I can't think of a company that can see that more broadly than Swiss Re. So would love your perspective on how we see the challenges in E, especially as we enter this weekend with the COP26 conference coming up. I think it's a very timely event to talk about this. So would love your views from Swiss Re's perspective.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for being here. It's a really honor to present today. And yeah, absolutely, this is a topic we have looked into as a reinsurance company. Our job is to take risk, and we are getting exposed to climate change. So if we go back historically and look, what is the impact of natural catastrophes and other climate change related perils? We can see there's a drag on economic growth, GDP, of 1.6% over the last 50 years on average. That, of course, different between different years. But if I look back at 2020, last year, we had 190 billion of economic losses that was created by climate change related perils. Roughly 90 million of those were insured. So there's still a big gap between what getting insured and what is still not insured, where others carry the losses. We expect this number to increase, as mentioned. And it's not just because of climate change happened. Clearly, that's a big driver. And I will come to that in a second. But what we also see is, of course, change in socioeconomic values. We have now more people living closer to water, which are then more exposed to flooding events and similar things. But then, of course, the severe weather events that happens. In our data, what we see for the moment is not the big named events that are increasing. It's actually the smaller mid-size events that really driving the impact. We call them secondary perils. So those are the secondary events, apologize. These are the items that you maybe not always see on the first page in newspapers, but happen constantly in terms of thunderstorms, wildfires, and other things. And this is the one that really driving that increasing number overall losses. We think last year we have around 70% of all the economic losses was driven by what I call secondary events. Already this year, we are on a record height globally. And as mentioned before, we already saw in Korea. Korea is absolutely not unimpacted by this. We had 3 typhoons last year, creating roughly losses of $500 billion US dollar, which is a quite high number. 500 million US dollar, translating between Korean won and US dollar quickly here, which was quite devastating. And we had 50 days of continuous rain impacting Korea. So there is absolutely that. Now, if we look ahead, because one thing is to look in the past, if we try to look ahead, and we have done some research on this topic, and there was an important paper out from IPPC recently, where the indication is that all the effort is currently doing still gonna not decrease climate change, the temperature change. The target on the Paris Agreement is 1.5 degrees, but the current estimate is actually reaching 2.7% mid this century. If we look at numbers then and see what impact that has on the global economy, we see a drag of around 14% globally. That's a quite high number. The global financial crisis a couple of years ago is estimated to done between 7 to 10% economic impact in terms of growth over time. So it's a very large number. For Korea is also impacted for that. Our estimate is around 8 to 10%, mainly driven by sea level rises, challenges on crop yield, so the agriculture sector most likely going to be more challenged, and heat stress, which impacting people's health. So for Korea, this is also a topic to need to be addressed. Now, I spoke as insurance, but climate change is not an insurance topic, it's a social topic and a social risk that need to be addressed. But as asset owner, as mentioned, climate change is most likely the largest economic threat that we're having for the moment. So we need to do our part to this. So therefore, I'm very happy to work for a company that started addressing climate change already in 1979, before someone was born, I can tell, is that. And we have continuously driving this topic over time. So 2017, we became PRI signatories. We have then 2017, we have all our investment benchmark against an ESG benchmark. And 2020, we were forming the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance. So what do we do concretely now? First of all, we of course excluding certain sectors. And that's the relatively easiest part of our investment process, where we have identified sectors that exposing us to further climate change. We do not invest in them anymore, and we de-invest that we're having. Then we're working with inclusion. So we're working on improving ESG investment in the transitory process that we're currently expecting. So we're investing in renewable energy, we're investing in electricity enhancement, and various things. The rough number of that is 5 billion that we're targeting by 2025. And then we're doing an enhancement overall. So for the rest of our portfolio, we're currently steering our manager to not invest only through a mandate describing an investment benchmark. There's also an ESG benchmark including that, and we're measuring their performance against that and challenge them in discussion. Governor Ibon mentioning that there's also an economic reason to do this. 2020, we outperformed our investment benchmark by 1.3% due to our ESG investments. Of course, that was a very volatile period, and ESG investment tend to do better during volatile time.
Thank you very much. Wow. Over 100 billion of uninsured natural disasters. I think that's quite a telling figure in terms of the impact, not only on the human side, but also on the financial impact. Stephen, we'll ask you to talk about the societal challenges. I mean, I think the #1 series these days on Netflix is a Squid Game. And I haven't seen it yet, but I started watching a little bit, and I was just quite honestly emotionally drawn because of the various states of destitution that people were in, if you look at all the different characters that come out. And I think in many ways it's a reflection of the sort of the societal challenges we see, where essentially the haves, have not. COVID last year, in many ways, I think people are saying that has created an even bigger divide. We're seeing divisions across not only on wealth, but also on people's mindset. I think the politics is more divided in many parts of the world than ever. Would love your views from BNP Paribas' perspectives on what are the societal changes and challenges you see as the biggest priorities to tackle, and how BNP Paribas is addressing some of these challenges.
Thank you, Richard, and good morning to all of you. Seems I'm the only one who's able not to wear a face mask, so I count myself lucky to be in Hong Kong. And although I would have liked to be physically with you, as we all know, that is not so easy these days. I wasn't planning to talk much about Squid Game. I did see it, but I will talk about broader, I guess, how we at BNP Paribas Asset Management integrate these social factors as part of our ESG framework. Let me maybe first start off mentioning that although we get invited to many more conferences to talk about ESG and ESG investing, BNP Paribas Asset Management has been doing this for actually a very long time. Already in 2002, we had our first SRI, Socially Responsible Investment Fund, launched, and we were already then part of the institutional investor group on climate change. And this is 2002, this is nearly 20 years ago. And since then, we've continued our further development in that space, being a founding member in 2006 of the UN PRI, which we're very happy to see the growth in Asian membership of the UN PRI for asset managers and asset owners to be now at about 350, I believe. So a very strong development there in the overall asset management industry as a whole, to become more focused on ESG investing. Sort of our latest overall thinking about ESG investing is part of our sustainability strategy that we launched in 2019, which brings everything sort of together in a very clear and easy to understand framework. So it's basically centered around 6 main pillars. First, already mentioned by some of the other panelists, ESG integration. So we include ESG factors based on a proprietary scoring model across all of our portfolios and all asset classes. Secondly, stewardship. So we're very active in voting and engaging with companies that we invest in. Third are our responsible business conduct and sector-based exclusions. Again, they can range across all types of issues, a lot of them around indeed environment, but also on social basis, and I'll come to that. The fourth pillar is a forward-looking pillar on how do we want to sort of focus our investments in a more general sense into how do we want to create a forward-looking view on ESG, and that's centered around 3 E's. So first is energy transition, second is environment, and third is equality. So 3 E's there as sort of forward-looking principles for guiding our investments. The fifth pillar is around our very dedicated, what we call sustainable plus investment strategies. They are enhanced ESG strategies. They have a thematic focus and impact focus. And sixth, I think we haven't spoken much about that yet, but all of us are also part of a corporate, part of a company. And so our corporate and social responsibilities are also very much aligned with our ESG principles, and we feel it's very important that as a company BNP Paribas as a group and asset management specifically, that we walk the talk when it comes to our own practices around ES and G. So as Richard said, I had agreed to focus a bit more on the social elements of how we integrate that into our thinking. Again, I'm going to go by the framework. So in terms of our scoring methodology and our integration into our investment process, we score companies differently based on the sectors that they operate, and that's the same for the elements that we consider for scoring companies on a social basis. So for instance, in more accident-prone industries like say mining or construction, we look a lot at health and safety of particular companies that we invest in. When it's more maybe on services and other industries, human capital management criteria may be more relevant, and we look at scoring that. And in other sectors, yet again, maybe the supply chain is a more important area of focus, and we again focus on how do companies manage and oversee their entire supply chain, because as we know, that is equally important to make sure that the companies that they work with apply the right sort of social policies and principles. So that's sort of on our scoring and integration methodology. On the second pillar of our approach around stewardship and active engagement with companies, I think very important there that we feel that we're very active investors. We believe in really taking action at board level, meaning at annual general meetings. We vote quite regularly against management. So specifically on the general meetings that have taken place in 2021, about close to 2,000 year to date of these annual meetings, we voted about a third of the resolutions negatively. And a lot of them are indeed related to the S, to the social factor, particularly around gender diversity on boards. So in that sense, we have rejected over 36% of nominations for new directors on boards. We feel if there is no female on a board, then we reject any male new appointment. And then we have now increased that to 15 or even 30% in certain countries, where we systematically vote against adding new male directors if there's not enough females on the board. We think it starts from the top. It should be the diversity level should increase at boards. Similarly, you talked about inequality. There also we look at executive compensation, and we have voted over 60% of board resolutions around executive compensation down, because we feel that the executive compensation is not in line with what we feel a fair distribution across the entire organization. So we are quite active on that front, and really act upon our beliefs there around the social criteria. I also mentioned our responsible business conduct as our third pillar. We do exclude companies also on the basis of social criteria. They are part in some of our exclusion policies around coal. They are part of some of the policies around palm oil, where indeed also social elements play an important role. So, even in our exclusions policy, social elements are very important. And then really also quite unique is that we now have a new strategy that actually allows, it's part of that sustainability plus range, that allows investors to actively focus on companies that score better on, let's say, the the S factor. And many companies have launched a lot of sustainable decarbonization, biodiversity kind of strategies. We do too, but we have already moved on to also look at funds that specifically target investing in companies that, let's say, reduce inequalities. So it's a new strategy we call inclusive growth, and it's a strategy that evaluates companies, according to our own proprietary developed scoring model around various pillars of inequalities around safety for the most fragile, social mobility, access to primary goods, respecting business ethics, and also decarbonization to some extent, because that does create also inequality from a global perspective. So that's an area where we are again taking the lead. As I said at the start, we are a long-term sort of ESG investor already. We've been a very active investor when it comes to trying to change behavior of companies. We are one of the best rated companies by share action in terms of our behavior and our voting at annual general meetings. And as I said, the S factor is definitely also something we are focusing a lot on as our overall strategy, but now also through dedicated strategies can give access to people who are interested in making a difference and a change in that particular part of the ESG landscape. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You mentioned that you reject board nominations if they don't have enough gender diversity. And we were taking pictures here at the Korea Times Forum this morning before you came in. And it was predominantly male. And we have all male panels here. And I actually think, I'll come back to you later around Korea, but I think, it's particularly striking you mentioned that. And we look at the room and we look at the participants. And I think we still have many ways to go, unfortunately. So last but certainly not the least, Mr. Yi, from MPS perspective, I've seen obviously that MPS is having a big force across the Korean economy, and obviously a very important part of all of us, including myself. I've been on, a member and looking forward to my pension. But one of the things that you've announced recently in May is the move away from carbon and how you can invest into non-coal investments. And I think this is particularly important given what Korea is trying to achieve, one of the most aggressive reductions. And yet coal is still the #1 source of energy for Korea. And I think the Korea Times actually has an article showing the percentage. And I was surprised to see in 2018, more than 40% of the Korean energy still comes from burning coal. And so I would love to hear MPS and how you're thinking about addressing some of the opportunities as the country looks to shift away from coal.
한국말로 편하게 해주셔도 될 것 같습니다. 네.
You may speak
Thank you
in Korean.
for the opportunity, and let me talk about the principles for responsible investment of MPF. These days, sustainability is one of the most popular words. As I know, the definition of the sustainability is meeting our own needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So the sustainable growth is the harmony between the short-term and long-term growth. It does not require sacrifices of a short-term performance for the future, and vice versa. Responsible investment of the MPF is implemented for the purpose of securing the long-term profitability. That is, we do not invest excessively in specific things in time and do not reject the specific investment opportunity for a short-term performance only. In the investment decision-making process, we consider not only traditional financial factors, but also non-financial factors, such as ESG. Furthermore, the after-investment decision-making through monitoring, proxy voting, dialogue with the company, and exercise the shareholder rights, that is an engagement. We try to enhance the long-term profitability of the funds by enhancing the sustainability of the investment assets. This is our most important principle for the responsible investment. Actually, we have 9 principles for the investment, the responsible investment, but I want to just only one, this major, the principle. Yes, and thank you. And also last May, the MPF declared a coal-free investment that included the introduction of a strategy to limit investment in the coal mining and coal power generation industries. The backdrop of this is a strengthening of domestic and foreign regulatory, such as the carbon border adjustment mechanisms, investments focus on eco-friendly companies. Such changes may affect the sustainability of investment assets, especially electric power, chemicals, and steel, and transportation, etc. This will also affect the long-term profitability and risk management of national pension funds. Therefore, we have decided to respond it. Before anything else, it was decided not to invest in new projects for the construction of coal power plants at home and abroad and everywhere. A formal step, a process for collecting opinion from experts and stakeholders will be implemented to determine the scope of target industry, company selection method, how to limit, when to limit, and so on. I think it's time for companies to analyze how changes affect their financial performance and sustainability also. MPS and other money already have moved, so companies do establish and implementing the responsible strategy as well. If not, companies will be forced by money, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I also invite the audience to ask questions. I feel like many of these forums are very, very formal. And so if anyone would like to ask questions, just raise their hand and we'll have people send a mic. If there's no questions from the audience, I'll keep asking questions. I'm not sure if you guys... yes, the gentleman over there.
Thank you very much. I'm Christoph Heider, President of the European Chamber of Commerce in Korea. And so I've observed the ESG development over the last couple of years. And it suddenly, let's say, became a hot story. So, and I think you also mentioned about this greenwashing at the very beginning. So I just wanted to know, where are we now? Are we already there where we have to be in ESG? Or is it still a very long way to go that we can say as corporates, this is now the ESG system what we need to fight climate change? Thank you very much.
Who would like to take that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think the answer on your question is no, we're not there. ESG investments and ESG corporate strategy is something that's still developing in all different markets. And I think it's also important to recognize that what we're doing currently is not enough. If you're coming back to my topic of climate change, what's happening so far is not enough. And they need significant more investments in order to manage through this transitional phase. If you speak about energy generation, it's not only that we need to replace the current power generation that we have. Actually, electricity demand is expected to increase with roughly 50% over the next decade because more cars are driven by electricity and so on and so forth. So there is a significant more that needs to do, and we need to find a model. We need to start looking into more model. How do we finance these high investment types of power generation, but very low running cost? So it's a completely different model to what we are used today, where we have a running cost that's quite high because we're buying coal or whatever it is to generate the power, but we need to change that. So there's a lot of much more fundamental topics that in there. We need to go beyond just saying that we have a strategy in place and that we measure some of our impact. We actually need to start changing a lot of how the economic system is structured in those questions.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Oh, Stephen, do you want to add something?
Sorry.
Yes, please go ahead.
I wanted to just add, yeah,
yes.
Indeed, I think we're clearly not there yet, but I think we need to all realize that this will take a very, very big collective effort. You know, it's clearly not just asset managers and asset owners that can change the world. We need to come together broader, you know, with companies, with governments, with other actors in the economy to move this agenda forward. And clearly now the biggest burning topic is climate change, and that's attracting a lot of attention. But you said a lot of it is also more broader, a different way of investing, looking at the impacts of our investments and trying to indeed steer things into a different direction by our investments. But it takes more clearly than just, you know, the investors that need to change their mindset. There's a whole collective ecosystem in that sense that needs to change, right from individuals to corporates to governments and everybody around that to get us on a better path. Because yes, we're just at the start of many things that need to happen before we can, for instance, tackle climate change, but also what you mentioned earlier, social inequality and other things.
Great. I think we have a question way in the back.
My name is Jisoo Kim, and I'm from the Korea Times. My question is, since you mentioned COP26, which will kick off Sunday, right, in Glasgow, what kind of message or what specific words would you be looking for corporations to take ESG more seriously? I mean, would COP have any effect on how corporations take this ESG principles and strategy?
Mr. Choi or Mr. Lee, would one of you would like to take this?
Let me. I do think, you know, sustainable investment, it became mainstream. The reason why, you know, because, you know, the financial damage, you know, because of natural disaster, we're having a record year, you know, every year. So which means that is really urgent issue to, you know, corporations. So that's why we have to take it very seriously. At the COP26, I do believe every country will commit, you know, carbon greenhouse gas emission by 2030, how much they're going to reduce, also how they're going to reach to net zero by 2050. So that will give huge impact to corporations. Corporations should be ready for you know, regulatory actions. This is not, this is kind of is binding agreement globally. So out of, I believe, UN SDG, you know, 17 goals, in terms of especially, you know, climate change, it is kind of binding. So what I do believe, you know, corporate governance is very important. We talked about S and E. Even we're now talking about the environmental issues, climate change. It's immediate risk to the global economy. So what you know, corporations need to do is they need sound and strong governance structure. How they gonna, you know, be prepared for 2030s and 2050 net zeros, and how they gonna, you know, mitigate, you know, physical risk, and also how they're going to transit to, especially in terms of energies. So that's why COP26 will emphasize once again every country what they need to do as promised. Also, corporations through the strong governance structure, they should implement everything agreed by the intergovernment, especially at the COP26. I do believe that's a very important event.
I actually want to follow up on the governance point because we discussed this in the prep session. Korea ranks one of the lowest in the world for governance indexes in many companies, right? And I've been doing consulting in Korea now for over 15 years, and when I have my colleagues from other countries come to Korea, they read the news about Korean executives and business people who face legal trouble all the time. It's in the newspaper, and it's very unfortunate around some of the cycle that we see with many Korean executives facing issues. How do you think about governance in the Korean context? Especially, Blackrock is one of the biggest investors into many of the largest companies in Korea. If you can provide any advice or tips for the country and for the companies here on how Korea can tackle the governance issue, I think that would be very, very helpful.
I think, the companies is responsible for ensuring they have appropriate governance structure to serve the interest of shareholders and also other key stakeholders. You see that, climate risk, I mentioned that is actually investment risk. But anyway, the company should be prepared to pursue long-term the value creation to serve best interest of shareholders. And they should have strong governance, especially think about that. Without strong governance in place, it's difficult for any companies to form various initiatives related to sustainability, especially E-related transition risk. So I think eventually that will lead to unfavorable outcome for the companies, especially BlackRock. We have the largest investment stewardship team, what we call BIS. We have more than 80 people globally engaging with the companies what they need to do in terms of sustainable investment, immediately climate risk related. And then what we do when first we engage first, then government, let's say corporations do not take the right action in time. We take, let's say, proxy voting actions against, let's say, appointing any specific directors or management. That's what we do. Especially Korea, actually, in terms of foreign investors' perspective, there is some concern because Korea, companies have very complex, structures between holding and the subsidiary companies. There's so often cases where many restructuring plans get decided not in the favor of broader shareholder benefit, mostly for, let's say, big shareholders. So that's why a lot of foreign investors have concern in terms of governance issues. That's Korean companies need to focus more on the governance. Governance is, I do believe, the most important factor to even implement the E strategy and S strategies. I think what the Korean companies need to do is they need to make a decision which maximize the interest of broad shareholder and also protect the minority shareholders. Not only making single successful cases, what they need is they need to make a strong track record. That will actually, will be recognized in the end by the market. So as an investor, actually, we are asking corporations so many stuffs, the focusing on G, especially both quality and effectiveness, which means we need some, let's say, female director. Also, that's coming from diversities. Quality leadership is essential to the business performance and board composition, and also whether they are independent, whether they are actually how much accountabilities, it's quite important. And then climate, natural capital, management, strategy, purpose, financial resilience, incentive aligned, with value creation, or company impact on people to take care of, stakeholders. So, and let me add one more. What the Korean corporation need to do, especially in terms of disclosure, it is quite becoming kind of global standard, which is actually in line with the 2030 greenhouse gas emission reduction, also net zero. What the corporation need to do is they need actually report aligned with TCFD, that is Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, which clearly they have to disclose what their business plan, how they're going to transit, how much they're going to reduce greenhouse gas, every year. And also another one is, more broader one is SASB, Sustainability Accounting Standard Board, which offers actually clear set of metrics to report across wide ranges of factors from labor practices, business ethics. But I see that globally, more and more companies reporting TCFD and SASB aligned. Also, encouragingly, more and more Korean companies actually reporting, disclosing based upon TCFD and SAB. That's it's encouraging news. But anyway, at the end of the day, all those stuffs should be controlled by governance. Also, Korean companies, as you know, that strongest power, I do believe, among any other countries, in terms of board. Board make a decision everything. That's why the governance is much more than important than any other countries.
Great. We have 3 minutes left. Are there any other questions from the audience? Oh, okay. We have someone in the back.
My name is Hyun Kyung-gang. I'm a Korea Times culture editor. And I would like to know how COVID-19 has impacted the corporate's investment on ESG. I'm asking this because there are some exceptions, but many companies have experienced, the revenue collapses after the COVID-19. Then if this is the case, so in this case, I think the investment on ESG has become more challenging for many companies. So I'm just wondering if this is the case for many companies, or despite this, companies still find it, still think that investment on ESG, they can invest, they can find financial resources to, keep investing in this ESG.
Okay. Mr. Dong-Suk Lee, would you like to respond? Or I don't know if anyone...
So I can try. Okay. Do you want me to go?
Yeah, we have 2 minutes. So
2 minutes?
Yes.
Very large question in 2 minutes, but I'll do my best. I think, if anything, COVID-19 have strengthened the belief in ESG in my corporation. It has really showed the vulnerability of the world and how interconnected everything is. So for us, COVID-19 have been, maybe strong to say, wake-up call, that we need to overlook things like supply chains. Is it really reasonable to have the global supply chains? Are there other ways to manage that? So for me, we have continued and even strengthening, to answer the question very straight.
Great. Well, we have 1 minute, so I'll wrap up here. I want to thank all 4 of our panelists here. I think we've heard quite a bit. And I think if I reflect on some of the points that was left here, I would summarize 3 or 4 big things I've heard. Number 1, there's lots of value and opportunity in getting ESG right. So there's money to be made in doing the right thing. That's always good. Number 2, there's still a long way to go globally, but also in Korea. If I look at, we didn't really touch on the gender diversity as much, but I look at this room, I look at the picture this morning. I think there's a lot more to do in Korea. Number three, I think in particular, there are some tough choices and tough transitions happening, especially around governance and around disclosure. I think this is something that when I first came to Korea to work during the IMF crisis, that was also a big thing. And even after 25 years, we're still talking about disclosure and governance. So I hope Korea can really make this transition quickly, use ESG as a means to really accelerate this transition. Thank you everyone for your questions and your participation, and I hope this was an informative session.
패널 토론에 참여해주신 이용진 맥켄지 한국사무소 시니어 파트너님,
Thank you very much for your participation for the session 1. Mr. Lee Yong-jin from McKinsey Korea, Mr. Lee Dong-seo from MDS, and Mr. Steven Biller from BNP Paribas, and Mr. Choi Man-yeon from Blackrock, and Mr. Jonas von Oldenskiöld from the Swiss Re Company. Thank you very much for your participation.
계속해서 마지막 순서인 두 번째 세션을 이어가도록 하겠습니다.
We're going to move on to the
세션
second
2
panel
패널 토론의
discussion.
주제는 How to bring
The
ESG
topic
value
of
to
the second panel
society.
discussion is how to bring ESG
모더레이터로는
value to
오영진 코리아
society.
타임스 대표 이사님,
Mr.
토론자로는
Oyoung-jin, the
권기준
CEO of
SK
Korea Times, will serve as the moderator, and as panelists we have
박성현
Mr.
신한금융지주
Kwon Gi-jun, the
부사장님이 함께
Vice CEO of
해주시겠습니다.
SK,
여러분 큰 박수
and Mr.
부탁드리겠습니다.
Park Song-hyun,
또한
the Vice
영상으로
CEO
참여해주고
of
계시는
Shinhan
크리스티안
Financial
텔러밸류 밸런싱
Group.
얼라이언스
We also
CEO님입니다.
have the
다시 한번
CEO
박수
of the
부탁드립니다.
Value-Based Alliance, Mr. Christian Bauer. Please welcome them with a big round of applause.
안녕하십니까.
Good morning, ladies and
코리아
gentlemen.
타임스 오영진 대표입니다.
I am Oyoung-jin, the CEO of Korea Times.
지금 바로 지난 세션에서
In the previous session,
주로
we
투자자들의
focused on
ESG 기준에 대해서
the ESG investment criteria of global investors.
지금부터는
In the second panel discussion
다른
session,
세션입니다. 그
we
ESG의
will have
주제이긴
discussion on a bit different topic. Although
ESG가
we will be talking about ESG. We will focus on how we can maintain ESG practices and what will be the standard or criteria for doing that. ESG refers to environment, social contribution, and governance. ESG is the combination of the English words referring to environment, social contribution, and governance. These three issues are not just about companies' daily operations, but also with all the issues of stakeholders, including consumers, producers, and policymakers. ESG is also directly related to the future of the human beings. Korea Times recognizes the importance of ESG issues that today we have held the second ESG forum following the one we had in June. In session 1, global investors shared with us their ESG-related investment principles. I would like to thank all the panelists of the panel session 1. Now we're going to have session 2, which will be discussing the very core aspects of ESG. And what we're going to discuss in this session is something that is not well known to the public, and it may sound a bit complicated. Under the cause of social value of ESG, we need to standardize the social value and measure the social value of ESG. That's what we're going to discuss in this session. We should have a standard or criteria to present the universal social value of ESG so that companies or other organizations in countries may operate the ESG activities. And it will also help investors make better decisions when they think about the investment objects or portfolio. We heard from the speakers from Blackrock Asset Management and BNP Paribas Asset Management. Investors and asset management have their own criteria and standards in ESG investment. For 30 to 40 or 50 minutes from now on, we're going to talk about the global trends. And in this session, we have speakers from Korean companies, from Esg and Shinhan. In the second session, we will listen to the comments from the companies that actually practice ESGs. And we're going to proceed with the second session in a way that our general public can understand well. First of all, we're going to listen to the explanation about ESG from the CEO of Value Balancing Alliance that is leading the standardization and measurement of ESG through the video clip. And then we will listen to the comments from Mr. Park Sung-hyun, the Vice CEO of Shinhan Financial Group, and Mr. Kwon Gi-jun, the Vice CEO of SK, about what their companies are doing, and then have Q&As. As mentioned before, SK and Shinhan are the only Korean companies joining VBA. Let's have a look at the video clip first.
안녕하세요. Many thanks for the invitation to this conference, thanks to the Korean Times. I'd like to congratulate you for this timely event, ESG Strategy for Survival. If you're thinking about our current challenges like climate change or building back better from the COVID crisis, this is really what we need to talk about. It's all about the resilience of our planet, of societies, of the economies, and our business models. We currently see that many political initiatives like the Sustainability Development Goals, like the Net Zero movement, or the Green Deals, what we see in Korea as well as in Europe and in other parts of the world, are currently driving the agenda. We also see that standard setters like the IFRS Foundation, the Value Reporting Foundation, or regional organizations like IFRAC, or on a global scale, the World Economic Forum, are joining into this movement. We also see many additional efforts like matrices coming up, or for example, the G7 Impact Task Force, which is even going beyond just ESG disclosures, but talking and thinking about the impact of business models and how we can change the financial market, that investors are looking much more in the direction of impact investing. But this is all about disclosures. We also need to think, how do we measure success and performance of a company? How do we integrate sustainability aspects into management accounting practices like decision-making and steering a company? And to do so, in our opinion, we need to have two perspectives on value creation. First one is, how do we define the enterprise value? And the second one, how do business models impact societies, the wider economy, and the environment? When I say we, the Value Balancing Alliance is a non-for-profit organization consisting of over 20 international companies, and we are supported on a pro bono basis by the Big Four auditing firms. Our main ambition is to work on three areas. First of all, developing methodologies how you can consistently and standardize measure sustainability performance. Secondly, we need to test and to pilot these methodologies, because this is all about data availability, data robustness, and to understand how methodologies, as we are developing them, are changing the decisions what we take as businesses. Last but not least, everything what we are developing needs to be standardized at global scale, because we want to change the system. It's all about an inclusive and sustainable economy. So we are quite active in the field of advocacy, talking to politicians, talking to standard setters around the world. But we can demonstrate that looking at methodologies, how you're measuring your impact on societies and how you're capturing in new ways the enterprise value, make totally business sense. It's providing much better information with regard to risk exposure and risk management, but also business opportunities. So for companies, it should be the direction of travel to assess their overall impacts and to understand how this is affecting the value as an enterprise. It's all about better information for decision making and for external disclosures. We are currently a European-based organization, but we are more than happy to have Asian companies, especially from Korea, onboarded as members. First of all, one of our founding members is Esg. We have joined the VBA a bit more than 2 years ago, and we are an essential part of driving, piloting, and testing the methodologies we are developing in business applications. You all know the Esg double bottom line principles. And this is what Esg is bringing in for the development of the methodologies, so that in the end we come up with one global consistent approach how we are measuring the success of a company, taking natural, social, human and financial capital into account. We are also glad to have the Shinhan Financial Group with us. It's the first Asian financial sector company which is contributing to the work of the VBA. And with the Shinhan Financial Group, we are working together how we can support the efforts towards net zero and social value measurement. This global movement, and I just can encourage you to join in, because businesses need to provide solutions at global scale. It does not make sense that we are working separately in countries or in sectors. It needs to be a global movement. Many thanks for inviting me for this short introduction, and I wish you all the best for your conference. 고맙습니다.
Then we're going to listen to the presentation from the two panelists.
순서가 바뀐 모양입니다. 안녕하세요. SK의
Hello,
SV위원회에서
I am Kwon Gi-jun from SK SV Committee. Thank you very much for inviting me, and from now on, I will talk about SK's case, so how we are bringing the ESG to the society. So I think you all know about this contents. If you search the news articles in Korea, especially in the fourth quarter of last year, and you see that the ESG keywords are everywhere, and consumers are talking about ESG as well as government, regulation, financial institution, and companies. So everything and every stakeholder that are surrounding the companies are talking about ESG.
저희들은 이런 것들이 어떻게 저희한테 이제 받아들여지느냐.
So we are checking the mechanism, what that is influencing the company, our company. So first of all, consumers change their notion and perspectives, and then the government will put up regulations about that, and they will be accepted by the capital market, and companies will get pressure to make changes. So this is the main flow, and actually in the reality, among this progress, consumers and the government and regulations, regulatory authorities are all pressing the companies. So we really want to do it well. So that is why we are thinking about many different ways, but we are not sure how to do it right, because there are so many international organizations and assessment organizations and ESG related organizations and foundations. So we don't know who to follow. So in this case, we went back to the fundamental, and I believe that the biggest pressure comes from the changing perspective of investors. So investor considers ESG a new risk factor. So that is why we cannot just evaluate the financial performance of the company only with the financial information, but we need to combine it together with the ESG data. So as you saw from the earlier slides, there are so many standards, but we came up with our own standard, as you can see here. So we have ESG core indicators that are used inside our company SK. So on the left, you can see the details. So we have 37 items and 88 disclosure items. And in the first quarter of this year, we started to release the report from our company. So it seems like it is a kind of muscle building activity inside our company, and this is how we evaluate the corporate performances. And we saw that there was actually an increase in the ESG performance together with their financial performance outside their companies. In addition to this, we also focused on measurement. I think this is the key topic today. So we always say we have to know where we stand, and only then we can measure the reality and make plans for improvement in the future. And we see this from the ESG perspective. We want to monetize the effect of the ESG plus and minus. So we are now making efforts to make more pluses. On the left, you see our monetization process. We have E, E, S, and G. And actually, it's difficult to do it on the G, but we have done this since year 2018. And on the right, we are disclosing the data together. And in previous session, they said that disclosure is really important. And to us, we always check SV based on our own rule, and we also disclose such data together. So in a nutshell, we call this double bottom line measurement, and we also disclose the minus values as well. And by doing so, for example, we disclosed that we recorded 2 trillion minus and how we will restore. So this slide explains about the ESG Management Framework. So we apply KPI and we go through many different steps to strengthen the embedding, the engagement. And on the right, you see strategic ESG. So we innovate BM and strengthen basic businesses. I believe that you must have seen these articles a lot. So we are now expanding our businesses in not only petrochemical and refinery businesses, but also the EV, electric batteries, and the hydrogen charging station, and etc. So these are the changes. So let's say we are now extracting oil and chemical products from the waste plastic or make biodegradable packages and etc. And then this is an announcement that we made in June. So we declared that we will reach net zero by 2050 or before 2050. And recently, about 4 days ago, our chairman answered that we will contribute to reducing the 1% of the total carbon reduction goal by 2030. And then we were the first Korean company to join the RE100. I believe that you may think we are just following the trend these days, but as we are actively participating in this, we can say that it's because we have our own ESG measurement systems and we are monetizing such processes for more accurate evaluation. And then with our experiences, we hope that more companies will experience these methodologies and utilize them in their business and management. So what we're doing now is, just like the previous panelists said, we are now sharing this with other companies. And we are also working on standardization of such measurements. So it should be done not only by a single company in Korea, but also by many companies around the world. Only then we can better use this tool, so we will focus on standardizing our tool. I think I used most of my time, but I want to say that we always use the term social value, but how is it related to ESG? So as you can see from the diagram, the essential ESG is the ESG risk management, and when we change it to the business, we call it strategic ESG. And what we mean by social value, the SV, is to include a broader perspective of the corporate social responsibility, like a new role, for example, giving positive influence over the society. So we set up the target for the ESG and we motivate ourselves to meet the goals, and we also have uniform global measurement to reflect the global trend. And we will do our best to become a better ESG leader in the industry. Thank you very much for your attention.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. At Shinhan Financial Group, I am in charge of sustainable management. My name is Park Sung-hyun. Today, I am going to talk about our efforts and case examples of creating and spreading the social value of ESG. As mentioned in the previous session, COVID-19 will further strengthen our belief and activities and efforts for ESG. Then why do you think we have to evaluate corporate ESG activities? We also had such questions in our mind, and we were curious about this topic, so we started working on the developing evaluation methods of ESG. Our ESG activities include social sectors and environmental sectors. And the question we had was that how such ESG activities create social value. And we wondered if our ESG activities will be substantially helpful for creating social value and making contribution to solving environmental problems as well. So I'd like to share with you how we developed the methodologies to assess our ESG activities and the actual social value created from such activities. First, society has increased its expectation and requirement for companies to enable sustainable management. So there is an increasing number of companies pursuing ESG values. Then through ESG activities, how much social value has been created and how such ESG activities and social value are related to the improvement of the corporate value. From companies' perspective, they cannot just input all resources to just ESG activities. So we wanted to see how much of our ESG activities create social value, and we have limited resources. And how can we use our limited resources to the sectors that have higher social value, which will be good for the society as well as for the companies? Here, we have Shinhan Value Measurement Framework. Actually, we cooperated with Yonsei University to develop this SVMF. The biggest characteristics of the social value measurement framework here is that we divide the social value creation domains into 4 stages. In the first stage, we input the resources and see how much social savings have been achieved. So we start from the input concept, and secondly, we look at how much social value was added through the ESG activities. And in terms of outcome, we see how much welfare improvement has been made in the life of the beneficiary. So most of the banks are providing education to prevent voice phishing incidents. So for our consumers, we provide education on how to prevent the voice phishing. So we see how much voice phishing related losses decrease after we provide the voice phishing prevention education to the consumers, and see how much change has been created in the life of our consumers after we provide such voice phishing prevention education. As mentioned before, we consider not only financial factors but also non-financial factors such as environment, society, and governance issues. In other words, we pursue three bottom line, and our ESG activities are classified into 9 categories, including environment-friendly growth and financial consumer protection and so on. Also, we think that it is important to measure the effect of ESG activities or the social value with monetary value. So we have these set of methodologies to measure the social value based on monetary value. This is our flow chart. Just please refer to that for your information. We have 192 programs related to ESG. Last year, we input 1.01 trillion Korean won, and the output is 1.2 trillion won. Compared to the cost we input, the highest performing ESG project was Financial Consumer Protection Project and Environmentally Friendly Growth Project. For these various social activities we conduct, we prepare annual report, and this report is made public every year. So our ESG activities are reported in this way, and you can see how our ESG activities have created changes and value in the society. But we are still at the early phase. We have just begun to do these activities. We are currently trying to make further improvement. We are trying to reduce uncertainty and identify how the lives of the beneficiaries have changed. For that, we are trying to collect better quality, more accurate data. And regarding the evaluation of social value, we joined the VBA. So we joined the VBA to make our social value measurement activities more objective. So we are taking a great attention to the social value measurement activities because as Peter Drucker said, if you cannot measure, you cannot manage. All of our activities need to be measured for us to manage those activities properly. So we are going to create good success stories so that we can be helpful for the whole society and for the purpose of enhancing social values. Thank you very much for your presentations. Then from Shinhan Financial Group, Mr. Park made the presentation. I have a question to Mr. Park. As you mentioned, the social value measurement framework has been created at Shinhan Financial Group. As an investor, a bank can make an internal measurement of its ESG activities. And in the previous session, the financial institutions mentioned that they have a certain criteria to select investment sectors and determine the amount of investment. And Shinhan's social value measurement system could be used by investors. And has your social value measurement system actually been used and employed by the investors? Actually, the social value measurement framework we have is dedicated to measuring Shinhan Financial Group's own ESG activities and social value measurement. And as for E, there's a lot of emphasis being made. The main job of a financial institution like us is to provide loans to the consumers. So, for example, if we make an environment-friendly loan product, how do we measure the social value of the environment-friendly loan product? If companies receive the loan from Shinhan Financial Group under the environment-friendly loan product, then the company will be able to reduce the amount of carbon emission by developing certain technologies. So in that way, we can measure the effectiveness or value of the environment-friendly loan product, because such loan product may lead to reduction in carbon emission. And in terms of negative screening, if there's a sector that is likely to incur a lot of social cost if we provide a loan, then we apply the negative screening. And when we review the credit of the possible borrower, and if the borrower is in the sector that is likely to increase the amount of carbon emission, then that will not be approved. So we have certain process where we don't grant loans to the borrowers that is likely to increase carbon emission. Another question is that I'd like to take an example. We have one company which is building coal power plant, and the other company is developing a forest area. Both of the companies may have negative impact on the environment, and if you use the current metrics between the two companies, which company are you going to make investment, and in which company you're not going to make investment? For that example, actually, the first company, if it generates power based on coal, it will increase carbon emission, then that will not be approved by our company. In our loan credit review process, we have a criteria that does not allow loan to sectors that create a lot of carbon emissions. And carbon rules will be created in other financial institutions as well. We have the concept of natural capital. Let's say that we are in Southeast Asia forest, or we are in Amazon forest. And let's say if there's a company that is trying to develop the Amazon forest, and that will actually destroy the biodiversity in that area. And you may have heard of TCFD. There will be a task force related to natural capital. So if such task force is created, then the projects that develop forest and natural areas that will do harm to the biodiversity, then such projects may not be able to receive the loan.
Now I will ask question to Mr. Kwon. You said that you are measuring the ESG and also disclosing the result under your group. So out of all those affiliates, so who was the best performer? So who got the best result for your measurement? Well, we measure not to rank them actually. I can tell you, but anyways, ranking is not important. But Hynix was number one because of maybe their scale. And if you see the measurement methodology, we see the ESG, we see all of the ESG, and we do have environmental, social, but we actually see their contribution to the economy. So we are measuring this in order to evaluate their contribution and values that they make for the society. And we also want to understand all of the stakeholders, including the shareholders and affiliates and the government and all of those. So that is why we are measuring this ESG when we provide dividend to the shareholders and when we cooperate with the affiliates and then the government. It is all, they are all works that are done among the stakeholders. But actually, we are focusing more on E or S. So E is mostly related to carbon emission, because when we emit carbon, that means we damage the environment, right? So we always focus on these two priorities. So you just mentioned the carbon, so I want to ask one follow-up question about the E. Let's say you have your subsidiary company that deals with the coal, like coal as energy source, then it should be impacted, right, because of the ESG. And maybe some other companies that are related to farming, maybe they emit less carbon compared to the coal-based company. Then what is more important? Reducing the carbon emission or replacing it by, for example, planting trees and then providing much compensation and etc. So which one gets a higher point? So I want to highlight once again that we are not doing this to evaluate and score them. Of course, these two are important. Reducing and decarbonizing from the beginning are all important. So we are doing this to make some complement in our structure. So we have about 7 minutes left. So we will invite some questions from the floor. So those of you who have any question, please raise your hand.
Thank you very much for your comments. I am from Deloitte Anjin accounting firm. I am in charge of ESG sector. I have question to each of the panelists. First, SK Group has financial indicators and non-financial indicators in their KPI establishment and measurement process. And I guess you may have had a lot of challenges in doing this, and you might have had some resistance from your employees. What kind of challenges did you have, and how are you overcoming those challenges? I'd like to ask you to share with us your experience. My question for Mr. Park Sung-hyun. We have ESG loan. In the case of Europe, once you receive certification on ESG loan, then the interest rate could become lower. And we have such trend being created among the some Korean government-owned banks. But I wonder if such ESG loan scheme is planned in Korean commercial banks, including Shinhan Financial Group.
So how you know well? Of course, it's minus. So, well, that is our group's philosophy, and we cannot reject it or refuse it. So when we have corporate philosophy, we must follow it. We must abide by it. And when we actually work on these measurements, we see that many things are changing after 3 years. So we try to find out minuses and pluses when we evaluate the social values. So that was our initial intention before, but we saw that they changes a lot. Like they fluctuate a lot, and then we found out that there are many areas that we can improve. So we thought that rather than checking what we have, we started to make the new things that we can work on with the SV measurement that we have. So that was the positive result. And I don't know if I answered your question well, but we actually started this because of corporate philosophy, and we are seeing changes in 3 years, and we are overcoming some challenges, and we are motivated in this progress.
So, as for environment-friendly loan products of banks, we could provide preferential interest rate. This year, Shinhan Financial Group became Korea's first financial institution to launch a loan product that provides preferential treatment to environment-friendly projects with lower interest rate. So I think Shinhan Financial Group is the first Korean financial institution to launch such a project, and that product received quite good positive feedback from the market. But for now, in Korea, we are at the very early phase in terms of creating and launching environment-friendly loan products. In the case of Europe, they have sustainability bank loan. For example, if BNP Paribas has provided such a sustainability-related loan to Danone. So they set a certain KPI and provide loan to the environment-friendly company. KPI includes environment friendliness scores, including the amount of carbon emission and so on. Also, they have KPI for S element. If the KPI indicators are satisfied, then they cut the interest rate. This is called sustainability-linked loan. So such sustainability-linked loan is being used quite actively in Europe, and in Korea we have a plan to quickly adopt such a loan scheme. Any other questions from the floor?
First of all, I'm very happy that SK and Shinhan are both members of the Value Balancing Alliance because I believe there must be transparency and also comparability for ESG reporting. So a couple of months back, there was a news in Korea, a newspaper, that the Korean government is considering implementing a Korean standard for ESG reporting. Yeah, so this is my first question. What do you think about this one? The second question I have is, so we know that SK, Samsung and the like, they all have the capacity to do a proper ESG reporting and the like, but the majority of Korean companies in number are actually small size companies. So my question to SK and Shinhan is, what is your proposal to also get all these small, medium-sized enterprises involved? Thank you very much.
Excuse me, can I ask you once more that what was your first question?
Okay, the first question is, so I believe I have an accounting background. So I did IFRS reporting for 10 years. So I believe in standards in reporting. So we are talking about ESG reporting. But a couple of months back, the Korean government suggested to establish a Korean-based ESG reporting. So what is your opinion on this? Is this a good decision, a good recommendation, a good move, or is it better to wait for an international standard setter?
It's definitely better to get the standardized criteria, because I think that if Korean government announced its own set of criteria, and let's say it's different from the global one, then what should we comply with? We are competing in the global market, and also we are one of the Korean company. So we have to do both actually, but it's a lot better. We have only one integrated criteria. And I hope that our government agree too.
Actually, I'm going to talk about the second part of your question. In the case of small and medium-sized companies, they may have more challenges than we think. When I meet with the CEOs of small and medium-sized companies, they wonder what they have to do regarding ESG, especially in the environment sector. As for decarbonization facilities, small and medium-sized companies want to know whether they can receive some benefit. And the government's decarbonization schemes are mostly focused on large companies. And small and medium-sized companies, some of them are connected to the supply chain that lead to the large companies. And I think that banks that have transaction with small and medium-sized companies could provide some tips and information to small and medium-sized companies regarding what kind of bank loan or benefit the small and medium-sized companies could enjoy in terms of environment element of ESG. And actually, we have the low carbon loan product, which is dedicated to large companies, and we don't have low carbon loan product dedicated to small and medium-sized companies. But if certain small and medium-sized companies are in the supply chain and have transaction with large companies, then they may be applied with our low carbon loan product. Thank you for your products. As mentioned in the welcoming remark, President Seung Myung-ho emphasized the importance of ESG and explained the Korea Times commitment to ESG. Due to time constraint, we'd like to conclude the panel discussion now, and we expect to have more dialogue with you next time. Thank you.
패널 토론에 참여해 주신 오영진 코리아 타임스 대표이사님,
Thank you, Mr. Oh Young-jin, Mr. Krista Heller, and Mr. Kwon Ki-jun from SK, and Mr. Park Sung-hyun from Shinhan Financial Group. Thank you very much for your contribution to the panel session. With this, we would like to conclude the 2021 Korea Times Global ESG Forum. With 71 years of history, Korea Times is the #1 English newspaper in Korea. Korea Times is one of the most influential English newspaper with the largest number of readers in Korea. With CNN, Wall Street Journal, Korea Times have greater influence. And through the booming popularity of Korean Wave, Korean Times have increased the number of readers in South Africa and in other continents of the world. Korea Times is Korea's representative English newspaper that is available to anyone in the world. I would like to ask for your continued support and interest in Korea Times. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you.